السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على رسول الله أما بعد. So today inshallah ta'ala we ask Allah ta'ala to guide us to what is best and most pleasing to Him. And Zakat is our topic today, and I will briefly begin with an introduction. Then I will cover most commonly brought up issues or questions. Then after that, we'll have enough time inshallah to open up for any additional comments or questions. That way we can keep a kind of flow as opposed to taking questions right from the beginning, and then we may lose track and miss the flow a little bit. So firstly, we know that Zakat is the twin of Salah, as some ulama used to call it, the twin of Salah. They're always mentioned together in the Quran. And the emphasis of both is huge. And Zakat is intended to purify our wealth, purify our hearts, and build a united, strong community. Purify our wealth because, especially today, the wealth that we attain, we don't want to have extreme waswasa and say that everyone's wealth is haram. But at the same time, there's often a risk of consuming and taking an income that has question marks over it. So Zakat is intended to purify unintentional consumption of haram. Zakat doesn't undo intentional, known consumption of haram wealth. That's something important to keep in mind. If somebody is buying and selling alcohol, paying zakat won't wipe away that sin. Zakat is an obligation, even if someone is trading in alcohol. Okay, zakat is still an obligation, but this remains a sin. So that's what's meant by purifying. Zakat purifying wealth. Zakat purifies the heart because human beings are attached to wealth. Yeah. وَتُحِبُّونَ الْمَالَ حُبًّا جَمًّا, Allah says. It says, and you, humans, love wealth hugely, so much, so attached to wealth. People fight over money, people break ties, family ties over money, people kill over money. So zakat is intended to cleanse the heart a little bit from being too attached to wealth. So we are doing ourselves a favor by fulfilling this obligation of zakat. And also, it's intended to bring a community together so that there is clear support mechanism in place. People helping one another and supporting one another. Zakat is not intended to be a burden on the person giving zakat either. It's not there to burden people or make life difficult for people. And this is why zakat is an obligation on our wealth, certain types of wealth, that is surplus, that is above our personal needs. Zakat is an obligation on wealth that is above personal needs. So there is no zakat on personal items and personal property that is used, even if it's a large amount, even if it's expensive. We touched upon this a few days ago. Even if somebody has an expensive house or an expensive car or expensive clothes, that does not make zakat obligatory on those things. Because zakat is obligatory on the surplus, on the additional, the extra that remains. Not just extra, but the extra that a person keeps for a whole year. That extra that someone keeps for a whole year shows that the person is not in such desperate need for that wealth. If they were, they wouldn't have it kept aside for a whole year. Now, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, dirham, the silver dirham, and the gold dinar were used to trade, to buy and sell. So zakat thresholds were measured in accordance with that. And who can remind us of what we said last week? Last week we mentioned that you can either calculate the threshold. Threshold means how much do you need to have for a whole year for zakat to be wajib. If you have $10 for a whole year, that's all you have. Do you pay zakat? No, because you haven't reached the threshold, which is called the nisab. That nisab can be calculated according to 200 silver dirhams or 20 gold dinars in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The problem is, if we use the silver measurement, we're going to come to around $600, $620, which means that anyone who has at least $600 kept aside for a whole year has to pay zakat. That's the dominant position in the Hanafi school and in the Hanbali school. Most contemporary scholars prefer that view because they feel that this way more people are paying zakat. The second opinion is to calculate according to gold because it's a more solid currency and it's a better indicator of wealth. And if we use gold calculation of the nisab, we're going to come to around $8,000. So only if you have $8,000 kept aside are you obliged to pay zakat for a whole year. You have $8,000 kept aside without needing to touch it. Could be in a savings account, could be just under your bed in cash, whatever it is. Or it could be any other zakatable item that we're going to touch upon. Only if you have $8,000 and above, then do you pay zakat. If someone pays zakat, even if they have less than 8,000, that's better. But I'm not convinced that it's obligatory. Because like I said, the second opinion is a better indicator of genuine wealth. Okay, and $600 being kept aside, that could go like this. If someone has to fix their car, or someone has to, has to pay for medical expense or something along those lines, that could disappear in a moment. So the 8,000, the gold nisab rule is in my view a better indicator. And if a person gives zakat, even if they have less than that, then even better. Like we said, we're doing ourselves a favor first. Zakat is obligatory on four main things. The first is gold, silver or cash. Okay, the first classical books of fiqh will mention gold and silver. Okay, we add cash because that's the dominant way of trading today. Gold, silver or cash. So if somebody has gold bars that they're buying, okay, I don't know if anyone is trading in that kind of thing, or buying gold or silver bars and keeping them in the hope for maybe needing them someday or whatever it is. Zakat is on that gold. Zakat is obligatory on the silver. Zakat is obligatory on cash if those two conditions are fulfilled. That it is above the nisab, let's say $8,000, and it is kept above, and it's kept for a whole year at least. It's kept for a whole year at least. That's the first thing. The second thing is trading commodities. That's things that are bought with the intention of selling. Bought with the intention of selling. So I buy 5 cars, maybe damaged cars or whatever it is, and maybe I'm a mechanic, I know how to fix cars well, so I do my own fixing, okay, clean them properly, and then sell them for a higher price. If I have those cars for a whole year, and they're above the nisab, zakat is to be paid on the value of those cars. Okay, so if a year passes by and the total of these 5 cars come to $50,000, for example, I owe zakat on $50,000. Then we have the third thing, agricultural produce, and we have cattle. Okay, cattle being camels and cows and sheep only. Okay, not horses, not other animals. These 3 categories. In the first 2 categories, gold, silver, cash, and trading commodities, zakat is 1/40th. 1/40th, which is 2.5%. 1/40th is an easy calculation because you just put your total together, divide by 40, that's the zakat. Okay, otherwise some people might get confused on the calculator. Divide 2.5, or am I doing times 100, this, that? Divide by 40, that's your zakat. Zakat is a 40th. On trading commodities, it's a 40th. On agricultural produce, like what comes out of the land, that's going to be a 5th or a 10th or in between. And I'm not going to go into detail on that unless someone has an individual case that we can discuss individually. Cattle also has its own kind of nisab. Our concern is the first two: gold, silver and cash, and trading commodities. Zakat, we said, is not obligatory on things that are kept for personal use, right? Even if they're expensive. So this is part of zakat, not intending to burden people. We don't say to people, that car is too expensive, you don't need that. Sell it, pay some zakat. The Sharia doesn't require that. Okay, well, that watch is too expensive. Who buys a $10,000 or $20,000 watch? That's too much. And you're not paying zakat as well. Sell that and pay zakat. The Sharia doesn't require that. Doesn't oblige it. Because the Sharia is not an unreasonable system which requires everyone to live according to one way, according to exactly the same standard. So, last week we touched upon, or a few days ago we touched upon, zakat on gold and silver jewelry. Right? And we said that the majority of scholars require or don't require zakat on gold and silver jewelry that is kept and being worn and being used and being kept. Is there zakat on it? So the majority of scholars do not require zakat on gold and silver jewelry. So if a woman has $10,000 worth of gold, necklaces, rings, bracelets, whatever it is, and she says, I wear them occasionally. Okay, special occasions, weddings, family occasions, this, that, I wear them sometimes. Or sometimes I have my daughters wear them, or a relative wear them. Okay, and I'm keeping it as well for the long term. Maybe when my daughter grows up, I'm going to give her this as a gift, or when she gets married, I'll give it to her as a gift. Common thinking, common practice, yeah? Okay. The majority of ulama, that's the madhab of Malik, and the ulama of Medina generally, and the madhab of Shafi'i and the madhab of Ahmad, is that there's no zakat obligatory on it. Al-Imam Ahmad and An-Nasa'i and At-Tirmidhi and a bunch of the great muhaddithin all say not a single authentic hadith is established on the obligation of zakat on gold and silver jewelry. And that's the view that we go by. And there are a few ahadith narrated, one or two. Some later muhaddithin authenticated those ahadith, but the more senior scholars of hadith do not consider them authentic. That's why Tirmidhi explicitly says there is not a single authentic hadith obliging zakat on gold and silver jewelry. And Nasa'i says the same, Ahmad says the same. In fact, we have 5 of the important companions, as Imam Ahmad says, who held the position that zakat is not obligatory on gold and silver jewelry. The 2 most important being Aisha and Asma. That's the wife of the Prophet ﷺ and the daughter of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. And this is an issue that concerns women more, and therefore their fatwa is given more weight than the fatwa of the men of the companions, because they would be more concerned and more interested in this kind of thing. So therefore, that's the view of most ulama. Why is there no zakat on it? Number 1, because of the reasons that I mentioned just now, textual reasons. Number 2, because our principle is that zakat is not obligatory on things that are kept for personal use. That's the rule. The Hanafi school says, we agree there is no zakat on things for personal use, but this is an exception to the rule, gold and silver jewelry. And that's because it's gold and silver. And we have another rule which says zakat is obligatory on gold and silver. Didn't we say that at the beginning? Zakat is due on gold, silver, cash. So this is obligatory on, even if a woman's keeping it to wear, even if she's using it at special occasions, whatever, she's not intending to trade. If somebody's buying gold and silver jewelry and selling it when prices go up and buying again and selling, say no, that's trading commodity now. That's no longer there for personal use. So it's zakatable according to all of the imams. That's a summary of this position on that, and we can see why scholars differ. The preferred position we go by, Wallahu A'lam, is the view of the majority. And this is especially appropriate. A woman might say, I don't have a regular income. But I've got quite a bit of gold. So her options now are either to borrow money to pay zakat, and that's an unnecessary burden that the Sharia doesn't put on people. Sharia doesn't require people to borrow money in order to pay zakat. If you need to borrow money, then you're not in a position to pay zakat. The other alternative is to have to sell some of this gold and then to pay zakat from that. If a husband or relative says, don't worry, I'll pay zakat on it on your behalf, that's fine. No issue there at all. We don't view it to be obligatory. If someone is going to go by the Hanafi position, if they want to pay zakat on gold and silver jewelry, then they would simply look, how much can I sell these necklaces, these rings, this jewelry today? Wherever I can sell it, and then you pay zakat on a 40th of that amount, that value that you could get. That's that. We also have to look at the issue of debts. Does holding debts, having debts owed to other people, impact the obligation of zakat? There are quite a few different views on this, classically and contemporary scholars too. And the most appropriate position would be the dominant view in the Hanafi school, and it's a strong narration in the Hanbali school, and other ulama hold it too. And that is that deferred long-term debts that aren't required immediately, that don't create an immediate burden, do not impact the obligation of zakat. Because if we say that, anyone with a mortgage, student loans, long-term debts is not going to pay zakat, generally speaking, will never pay zakat. Okay, so that's the more appropriate position. If it's a short-term, immediate debt you're expecting to pay quite soon, let's say within a month or two, or something along those lines, you can deduct that from your total assets that are zakatable, and then pay zakat on the rest. But not long-term debts. That's in terms of debts owed to other people. What about debts owed to me? Paying zakat. Am I required to pay zakat even though the money's not with me, it's with someone else? In this case, we have two well-known views. There are more than that. The most common opinion amongst the early scholars and later scholars is that it depends on the nature of the debt. If you're owed money by somebody who can easily pay you back, but you're giving them time, and you know that you'll almost certainly receive that money soon, okay, then in that case, most scholars consider that amount to be included in your wealth, and so is therefore zakatable. If it's money that you're not sure you'll get back, okay, you're not sure you'll get back, or a person is struggling or in a position of financial difficulty and they've expressed that and said, I'm going to do my best to pay you, but I'm not sure, then that's not included in what you have as part of your wealth, and therefore you don't include it. That's position number one, and it's the view of most scholars. The second view is the view of Imam Malik, rahimahullah, and that excludes debts generally. So any debt that is not owed to you, any debt that you are not expecting to receive before your zakat is due, is not under your wealth, and therefore you don't include it in your zakatable wealth. Especially if the other person is paying zakat on it. We don't have a case where two people pay zakat on the same kind of wealth. Okay, I hope that's clear. That's a second view, and it is a strong view. And look, when we talk about issues like zakat and finance and contemporary circumstances, it is impossible to think that we will have clear-cut, black and white opinions on every single issue. That doesn't exist. It won't happen. So some people may be bothered by the existence of difference of opinion. Oh, come on, difference of opinion again. Just give us one view, or what exactly is we're supposed to do in this case. The nature of that is difficult, and so it's only right to present. And if I was going to present all the opinions that exist, we'd be here till Eid, because opinions throughout history. Remember, we're talking about 1400 years of scholarly views, are endless. Okay, so I try to restrict and summarize the most dominant and common opinions. And the Prophet ﷺ did give people an element of flexibility in making their own decisions based on taqwa. That's an important principle in zakat. Sometimes there is an element of you decide, you as the individual. And so if we get an idea of what my options are, let's say what are valid opinions, make a judgment based on taqwa. Let's say you have huge amounts of cash, and we're sitting here talking about zakat being obligatory on gold and silver jewelry or not. In that case, taqwa might push you towards, let me just pay zakat. I've got the cash, alhamdulillah, plenty, and I'm not using it. I'll pay zakat. Not a problem. Okay, and in some cases, someone may say, I think I'm going to adopt this position because if I don't, I'm going to end up in a position of maybe having to borrow money or hardship or difficulty. So sometimes it will need a personal judgment based on the various valid opinions that exist. So that's deduction of debts and looking at how to treat debts. Like I said, the view of Malik is that debts that are not in our hand, that other people owe us, are generally excluded from zakat. Trading commodities. Trading commodities, like we said, are things that we buy with the intention of selling. We buy with the intention of selling. Whatever that thing is, it's zakatable. So normally we say, for example, your car is not zakatable. Your home is not zakatable. These are personal property things. But once they are bought with the intention of trading and selling, they become zakatable assets immediately. Doesn't mean zakat is obligatory upon them immediately. We still have the rule of 1 year, but they become zakatable assets. There's a difference between thinking about maybe selling your house and I bought this with the intention of trade. If someone has a thought about maybe I should sell this car and get a cheaper one, that does not become trading commodity. Urud tijara, as the narrations of hadith and the scholars of fiqh refer to it. That intention doesn't change its nature. In that case, it's only zakatable once you have sold it. I bought a house for $500,000, for example. I want to keep it. I want to live in it. I want to keep it for my son. Whatever it is, any intention that is not trading. Is that zakatable? No. Then I think to myself, I could have bought a house for $250,000. Maybe I should sell this one and buy a cheaper house. I have a bit more of a buffer in cash. So that does not turn into a zakatable item just through that intention. However, once it's sold, now you pay zakat on that cash once a year passes. If somebody buys something with the intention of selling, let's say a car, so I'm going to fix this up and then sell it. If a year passes with that under your ownership, is it zakatable or not? We said yes, right? Let's say before zakat is due, he says, no, I like this car, I'm keeping it. That's fine. It's no longer, it's now removed from the zakat discussion. It's removed from the zakat discussion. So if someone is doing that, knowing that they're trying to get away from zakat, that's between you and Allah. Oh, you can fool the mufti or the imam, but not Allah Ta'ala. So, no one should do things in order to get away from something which is intended to purify us. But if someone genuinely wants to keep the car, that's fine, keep it. It's not a problem if that intention was made before zakat is due. Okay. Very quickly, zakat on stocks and shares, and again we have two approaches, to this issue today, because stocks and shares can either be viewed as, let's talk about what are called floating shares. We're not talking about somebody who has bought half of a company that sells ice cream or donuts or something. Okay, that's a different case. If I put in, let's say, 500,000, okay, I wish, if I put in 500,000 in order to to buy a share of an ice cream company, for example, I become a co-owner, I become a partner in this company, and any profit that company makes, I will be sharing in that profit. My zakat will be on that profit. Okay, it won't be on the value of the company, it won't be on the building, it won't be on the, on these kinds of things, but zakat will be on the zakatable assets of that company. Okay, so if this company is buying things to sell, okay, things to sell, then the zakat will be on those things that are being bought to sell and kept for a year. I don't think that's going to work with ice cream or things like that. That should be making its way out of the business quite quickly. But zakat will be on zakatable items, and zakat will be on the profit made. If we're talking about floating shares, however, which is investing in the stock market, which most people do, and that's not actually buying, it's not technically buying, ownership in the company. This is where contemporary scholars differ. Is buying a share in a company in the stock market, is that actually being a part owner in the company? Or are we really just buying an item that is tradable? And those scholars that view it as being tradable items, Sheikh Muhammad Abu Zahra and Sheikh Abdul Wahab Khalaf and other contemporary scholars, they view these floating shares as not being real ownership in a company, but rather they view it as being a trading commodity. The share itself has become a trading commodity. It's something that people buy and sell. It's something that people buy and sell. If I have 50% ownership in a company, okay, a donut company or a restaurant or something, I can't sell it tonight and buy it again tomorrow and sell it the next day and buy it again tomorrow, right? It's a long-term investment, it's a long-term project. They don't feel that shares are the same thing, because you can buy a share today and sell it after 10 minutes, and buy it again after 10 minutes, and sell it again after 10 minutes, and that continues. And they argue that because of that, they should be treated more like trading commodities than being an owner in this company, or a partner in the company. This is what led probably most scholars today to saying, well, in that case, if someone is holding on to shares for the long term, then it kind of is like being a partner in the company. And if someone is trading, whether that be literally day trading or whether that be just short-term trading, every so often buying and selling, okay? If someone is holding to stocks for the long term, whether they are getting dividends from holding those stocks or not, but they're holding it for the long term, they should be viewed as a partner in the company, even if they have a tiny percentage. Whereas if they're trading on a regular basis, that share should be viewed as a trading commodity. How is that going to differ now? If we view the share as a trading commodity, how much of the share is zakatable? The entire value, isn't it? Yeah. If I have $10,000 in shares, zakat is 10,000 divided by 40. Zakat is on the full share, because it's a trading commodity, buying to sell. If we view it as ownership in the company, then this is now going to depend on what? How much zakat I pay is going to depend on what? On the nature of the company. On the nature of the company. And that's where, if someone is holding for the long term, maybe they can view it in that way. Look at the nature of the company and how much of its value is zakatable, how much of it isn't zakatable. And That's the dominant fatwa given by scholars today. It's the fatwa of Amjad, it's the fatwa of quite a few scholars around the world. And that is that zakat on things like pensions in the long term are treated in the second way. Because they're long-term holdings. And depending on the nature of the pension, of course. Okay, in the UK, a lot of pensions are requirements on workers, for instance. A lot of pensions are requirements and they have zero access to those pensions. These may be not zakatable to begin with, even if they're growing in value. And even if you can see them growing in value. They're not zakatable to begin with. Till once they're received afterwards, then the discussion on zakat opens. But we're assuming a pension in which someone has some control over, whether that be they're able to get hold of this pension, after taxes, maybe an early withdrawal penalty may be involved in it as well. The dominant fatwa today seems to be zakat is obligatory on the total amount of the pension, minus taxes, minus early withdrawal fees, minus any non-zakatable items in the companies that you've invested in with your, with your pension. Does that make sense? That would be a dominant view. How much are you deducting from, how much of a company is zakatable or isn't zakatable? That's something that requires, some kind of research. And there's no one rule for every company. In the UK, the National Zakat Foundation, having looked at, the FTSE 100 companies in the stock exchange in London, they've come to the conclusion that most companies they look at do not have more than 25% zakatable assets. That's what they say. That's not my field of expertise or something I've looked into in detail, but that's what they say. Some of the mashayikh say 30%. Mashayikh who've researched the financial element. Okay. And others maybe add to that or subtract from that. So again, this may be an element of using personal taqwa. Personal taqwa to come to a suitable figure which is zakatable. You deduct taxes, you deduct early withdrawal fees if applicable. You also deduct non-zakatable. So in the end, non-zakatable assets of the companies that you've invested in. So in the end, in reality, you may actually be paying zakat on how much of the total amount in the pension fund. It may come to like 20%, it may come to 25%, it may be 30%, it may be 40%, whatever it is. The second position, and I'll end with this, is the position that is in line with the principles of Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala. And that is that, obviously Malik wasn't talking about pensions literally, but he laid down principles that relate to, that can be applicable to pensions. And that is that no zakat is applicable on them at all. Once someone has the ability to cash them out easily, only then does it become zakatable. In fact, Malik's view is it's only zakatable once received. Once received. And that's the view of some of our mashayikh. And I'm not going to, to say this is 100% the view that I, adopt or, encourage or promote, or that's the view that I encourage or promote. But I will say, each person look at themselves and makes a decision based on personal taqwa. There's no black and white ruling on this issue, Allahu a'lam. So the first view, I think, is clear. That's probably the majority view today. And the second view, which is the view of Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala. Some of our, contemporary researchers on this argue for this view as well. Sheikh Sajid Ahmed Omar in the UK, whose field is finance and fiqh. And his, recently his PhD was published in 2 volumes on Islamic economics. His view is that there's no zakat on pensions at all. You also have Joe Bradford. I don't know where he's based here in the UK, in the US. Is it Texas? He also adopts that position of not paying zakat on pensions at all. It's also the view of Sheikh Abdullah Judai in Leeds, in the UK. And he's also a specialist in Islamic finance, and his PhD is also on that. He's written a detailed work on banks and riba and finance in about 600 pages. Hafidhahullah, is still alive. Also, his view is that there's no zakat on pensions. And having access to a pension with a large early withdrawal fee, in their view, counts as not having access to it. This is kind of where the difference is. Is having to pay a big early withdrawal fee, does that count as having real access to it or not? The position of Amjad is yes. Yeah, Sheikh Salah Sawi and some of the other mashayikh. Their position is yes. You have access to it, even with a fee that has to be paid. And if we say that no, that doesn't really count as having access to it, then we're going to probably incline towards the second view of not having to pay zakat. Once someone has hit the age of retirement, then we don't have the same issue of the penalty problem, but we don't say, no, you need this for retirement, keep it, no zakat. Because the principles of zakat don't allow that. Because people always have plans. We all have plans to live a long life and have money saved and kept aside and to do things, and I want to get married, and not me personally, okay, I want to get, might want to get married, I want to buy a house, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want my kids to... So we always have plans. So this can't be an excuse to keep huge amounts of wealth on the side just because, I'm keeping it and I may not have another income besides this. But we do say, if someone's in retirement and you have, let's say, $1 million, depending on what you've done over the years in terms of zakat, if you've taken the second view, which is to not pay zakat on it, then the moment you receive money, you pay zakat immediately. You don't wait for a whole year. You pay zakat immediately. That's the first thing. The second thing is, it may be appropriate to say, put aside a year's worth of expenses. A year's worth of expenses and then calculate zakat after that. Why put aside a year's worth of expenses? Two ahadith. First, the Prophet ﷺ, when he received money, as Umar radiallahu anhu says, in hadith in Tirmidhi and others, and authenticated by him, he said he would put aside a year's worth of expenses for himself and his family. He would put that aside. يَعْزِلُهَا, meaning to be left aside untouched. So if someone has reached the age of pension and their income becomes what's in their pension pot, that's where we say you can put aside a year's worth of expenses and zakat is on the rest. When we say zakat on the rest, what do we mean? Not necessarily 100%, but we go back to the rule of the nature of the companies being invested and so on. Allahu alam. That's what I can say, and there's a lot a lot to say, and there's a lot to look into, and if someone has anything that's been missed out or worth addressing, whether on what we've covered already or not covered that's zakat related, then please do. Yeah.
I have a quick question. You mentioned that how the portion of non-zakatable items from in your investment, let's say the 401k or pension,
Yeah.
whatever. How do you know how much is that? We don't know how much it is. Or is it just
Yeah.
a rule saying that okay, 25%?
The 25% rule is an estimate. If someone, which is most people, find it difficult to, So the question on how do you calculate the zakatable assets of a company? In some countries, companies pay zakat. Problem is solved. Okay. What concerns us is other than that, of course. So in that case, either you do the tedious job of looking at the balance sheet of every company that you're invested in, and seeing exactly the nature of their assets and so on, and then you make a decision. And if you do that, you may end up with a very low figure, 5-10%, and you may end up with a higher figure. Which is why those who attempted to give a kind of range attempted to make life easier for people and say most likely you will never be going beyond 30% or 25% or 33%, whatever that is. So that's the idea. It's possible to look at every company and check these things, but it's a burden. Yeah.
Just quickly to clarify that, 401k
Yeah.
would also have early withdrawal penalty.
Mm.
So if you want to take the money out and pay the zakat, there's a penalty, tax penalty, and
Yeah.
another early withdrawal penalty.
Yeah.
So one has to adjust for that too, deduct that amount out.
Yeah, correct. So if we're going to go with the view of most contemporary scholars, we would, let's say there's $1 million in the pension pot, you would take away, I don't know, can we say 20% taxes usually, something like that? Let's say as an estimate, 20%.
It would be higher than that.
It may be higher. Okay, 25%. Whatever it is, 30%. Okay, should we go higher?
No, 20 for IRS and
Yeah.
for state.
And the early withdrawal fee is what, 10%? Okay, it's around that, right? 10%. That's what I found when I looked into it. Add to that, so we've already deducted 30%, 40%, 35%, whatever it is. So now we are looking at the remaining 60 or 65%. How much of this is zakatable? If a huge chunk, from my understanding, you have some flexibility to choose what you invest in your 401k, right? Yeah, correct? Sometimes? Okay. So if someone is investing in, let's say a huge part of their portfolio is in gold, let's say, for example, then obviously more of that is going to be zakatable, because gold is zakatable. If a much larger part of that is in property, then much less will be zakatable, because there's no zakat on property that is being rented out, except on the profit that it makes, but not on the property itself. So depending on the nature of the companies being invested, that's how you're going to calculate. I do believe that the view of Malik is strong, of no zakat until it's received. But like I said, this is a personal decision that you make based on circumstances individual.
So since we unfortunately don't live in an Islamic state where there's no bait and man, so for those of us who do owe zakat, we kind of have to guess, or not guess, we have to basically determine on our own on who we're going to give this zakat to.
Yes.
So there's a lot of confusion. So a lot of people say because we reside in the United States that there's truly no technical poor people because the state takes care of them, whether it be in terms of food or in terms of housing. So then we send it to, let's say, back home.
Outside of the...
Palestine, Amman, wherever. And then you give it to a wakil, and then they give it to somebody else, or you give it to... What's the best route?
Paying locally is the sunnah. Because the Prophet ﷺ, when sending Mu'adh to Yemen, he told him, tell them that there is zakat obligatory upon them to be taken from their rich and given to their poor. تُؤْخَذُ مِنْ أَغْنِيَائِهِمْ فَتُرَدُّ عَلَى فُقَرَائِهِمْ. That's the sunnah, that's the ideal. And many ulama consider it to be wajib. In the Hanbali madhab, it is impermissible, for example, to give zakat outside of locality. And they measure locality as being like the distance of travel. So let's say, let's say 50 miles here and there. Okay, that would all be local. Sacramento will be local, this will be local, Roseville will be local, and so on. The second, position is that giving zakat outside of locality, if there is a good reason, is permissible. And those ulama have listed a good reason as being taking care of a family member. They've listed a good reason as being a desperate need, much more than their own locality. So that does exist. However, we don't want to be stingy on what need means, on what poverty means. I've touched upon this before. Poverty doesn't mean that, someone has nothing at all. But the fact that somebody is struggling to make ends meet, that person is allowed to receive zakat. Remember, zakat is there to also give people some breathing space. It's not a bare minimum, okay? Just enough for you to stand up straight. Zakat is also there to give people some breathing space, okay? Give them a bit of scope for their needs if they're struggling. So if somebody knows somebody in that condition in their community, give zakat to them. Zakat can also be given to people who are in debt, especially immediate debts. And I'm sure we know people who are in that situation, relatives, friends, and so on. Give them zakat. Give them zakat, and there's no need to tell them that this is zakat. Yeah, I've got extra money, whatever, I made some good profit on this investment, whatever. Here's some money, use it to pay off your debt. Jazakallah khair. That's a zakatable recipient mentioned explicitly in the Quran. Allahu a'lam. However, if somebody says, look, I've tried to see, I've tried to find out, I can't really find, or I have a brother, okay, at home, or I have a cousin, in a different country who's in desperate need, I'm going to prioritize them because they're my relative. Say, okay, there's scope in doing so. Allahu a'lam. Yeah. We had a hand and then here. Yeah.
Actually, a couple of questions on. You mentioned the view of Malik, so it's not regarding pension. There was no pension scheme that.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So this is based. He's referring to what?
Malik, rahimahullah, Imam Malik was referring to something of monetary value that you're not able to sell, now, or that hasn't been sold now. His view is that something of monetary value that is kept for the long term, not with the intention of selling today, tomorrow, next week, it's kept for the long term, it has monetary value, it's going to be increasing in value, maybe, that is not zakatable until you receive its value. So, according to Malik's view, for instance, if somebody bought 10 houses, total is worth $10 million. 10 houses. He says, I'm not selling them today. I may sell them, or I'm going to sell them in 10 years' time. Because I feel that that's a perfect time to sell. In Malik's view, there's no zakat on that until he receives the money after 10 years. That's his principle. And if we look at 401k or most pensions around the world, they would fit under that principle.
So there's no zakat even on what he has invested, which is 10 million? He took 10 million to invest buying this property.
Yeah.
So even though the gain hasn't been realized, meaning he hasn't sold
Yeah.
So even on the base,
No.
there's no zakat.
That's the view of Malik. It is a minority view. But it's his view on things that are kept for the long term, not intended to be sold anytime soon. Yeah, not intended to be sold anytime soon. And if we think about someone investing in stocks and or cryptocurrency and planning to sell it in a few months, or a few weeks, or next year, that's different from someone saying, this money is in my pension account for 20 years, 30 years. Definitely not planning to sell it. Does that make sense? So that would fit under the qa'idah, the principle of Malik's view, which is there is no zakat on its value until it's received after 20 or 30 years. Yeah.
Earlier you gave an example of a person buying a bunch of cars with intent to fix it and then sell it.
Yeah.
So now he still has those cars, he has fixed them up.
Yeah.
Zakat would be on what he paid initially, or what's the current value of those
Yeah.
cars?
Good question. Zakat, if I buy property with the intention of selling, after a year passes, zakat is obligatory on the current value of those things, not what I initially paid for them. So, if I bought, let's say a cryptocurrency, I spent $100 on it, and now after 1 year my portfolio is up to $10,000. That can only happen in the crypto world. Okay, $10,000. Zakat is obligatory now on the 10,000 because once I hit the full year, actually the $100 is not a good example because 100 is not above the nisab. But let's say I spent $8,000 to buy crypto. I'm above the nisab, right? And that continues to go up. By the end of the year, it's $80,000. I've been above the nisab for a year, and the profit is treated as being part of the original hawl. So therefore, I would pay zakat on $80,000.
Even though he has not
Even though the 80,000 hasn't been with him for the whole year, and also in the case of crypto, the chosen view is to treat cryptocurrency as currency, even if it's not technically realized. Wallahu a'lam. Yeah. Especially things that are actual currency, like Bitcoin and USDC and USDT, and these things that are actually used as currency in many parts of the world. That's currency. Wallahu a'lam. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Question here and then. Yeah.
So you talked about a company, right? Like a donut shop or an ice cream shop.
So you buy the things like flour, milk, and everything, and you make the ice cream and sell it. Is there zakat on the stock that you buy and keep it?
Correct, yes. If a year passes with that. Yeah. If a year passes with that. Obviously, if you're buying, making stuff, selling, buying, making stuff, selling, you're never going to have these kinds of things for a whole year, most likely. Then you're not going to end up paying zakat. You're just going to pay zakat on the profit. But if that stuff does remain for a whole year, then it's zakatable.
So I think it's a related question to what he has asked. So if we are like trading in stock and it's a short-term investment,
Yeah.
if I understand correctly, you're saying it has to be held at least a year before it becomes zakatable? Or the initial money I started with, let's say $10,000, but I'm changing stock.
Yeah.
Then the last one has to be held for a year, or how do you calculate?
Yeah, the stocks are treated as trading commodity. They're treated as trading commodity. So therefore, they follow the same rule of reaching the nisab, and a whole year has passed. Now, I may have made profit over the year. I may have made losses over the year. But when my zakat, and this brings me to the importance of having a zakat date that we're clear about, that we choose for ourselves. Technically, the moment we hit $8,000 and we hit above the nisab, we should have counted from then. That should have been our zakat date. Okay, but most of us probably didn't keep track of that. So we choose an appropriate zakat date. Every year we look at how much I have in zakatable, assets. Gold, silver, crypto, trading commodities, and I pay zakat on that. Divide by 40, that's my zakat.
You don't need to spend 1 year on it.
After a year?
No, once.
After a year from being above 8,000.
Yeah, so next year, whatever income you have.
Yeah, even then. However, we do say you deduct immediate expenses. We do say you deduct immediate expenses. No, not for a year, for that. Immediate for that month, for example. Yeah. Wow. Yes.
I have a question about the gold jewelry.
Gold jewelry? Yeah.
If the gold jewelry, some of it was never used in the last 1 year.
Yeah.
So do those become?
Is this gold and silver jewelry that is bought with the intention of buying and selling, or to just keep?
No, for personal use.
Personal use. There's no zakat on it to begin with.
But not used in the last 1 year.
There's no zakat on it at all. Even if it's not used for 5 years consecutively, there's no zakat on it. Yeah. That's the view of the majority and what we go by. Yeah.
Regarding the dividend, if the dividend is spent for livelihood,
Yeah.
I'm getting dividend, but I'm spending.
No zakat. Dividends are like income. Dividends received, whether it's monthly, whether it's every 3 months, every 4 months, every 6 months, whatever, it's like income.
Isn't it like a profit from the stock that I invested? It's a kind of profit given to me by the company, right? The dividend.
Yeah.
So that
We still have to have a year passing by for it though. Yeah. So if I'm renting a house out, I don't need to pay zakat the moment I receive my first rental payment. But I add that to my income and wealth and what I have that's zakatable, and only after a year pay zakat. Wallahu, sisters, we neglected anything, or have we almost covered everything? Okay. Yeah.
If I have, for example, 8,000 is a nisab, I have 12,000, and I have my dependent son. I say 4,000. On the bank I gave him his bank account.
Yeah.
Even though he's my dependent, my minor, will it bring me down to a nisab or it will be nisab?
If it's 8,000 exactly, you're still at the nisab. Let's say it dropped you to 6,000, for example. You're below the nisab. But like we said, especially if that's done for a genuine reason, not to get away, not here's 4,000, next month give it back. Yeah, if it's given, that's not a problem. Yeah. Maybe he has a wedding or something, you want to give him an amount of money, then that's it, you're below the nisab. Yeah. Okay, final question and then we can end that, I think.
I don't have a question, but
okay.
I just have a
comment.
We do have MCF that's collect the zakat, so we can help out people
in the local
separate zakat account. It's not used in the MCF operations.
Mashallah.
But we do help out. There is a committee, and we decide based on
good.
their
zakat collection.
So if anybody is interested
give the zakat or okay, good, yeah, jazakallah khair. We need to sit down sometime with the zakat committee so that I can at least know, because people will ask and then at least I'll have an idea of what's happening, and yeah, that's good. Jazakumullah khairan, sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi. Assalamu wa rahmatullah. Bismillah, barakallahu feek.
Man, a lot of people don't understand, man. When Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu, when the Arab came and said, we're okay with Islam and everything about it, but we don't want to pay zakat. When the Harb al-Ridda was some of the most fierce battles that the Ummah has ever seen, because of that, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu said, if you owe the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam a string, I'm going to get that string. This is when he switched, when he came to the haqq, and Allah's haqq. And a lot of people said, the reason why I asked that question is because you hear it all the time. They'll say, fishy for America, or fishy for Europe.
So I'm not going to pay zakat.
يعني أعطيها يعني حرام عليك تعطيها لواحد هون في أمريكا وين تقدر تعطيها لواحد في فلسطين. And you get put in a position. It's like, do you know every poor Muslim?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Why then we have pride. Not every Muslim is going to come in here and rag.
No,
I don't have any money.
Yeah.